Welcome to the Empowered to Connect podcast, where we come together to discuss a healing-centered approach to engagement and well-being for ourselves, our families, and our communities. I'm JD Wilson, and today on the show, we have one of our favorite humans on earth. It's Robyn Gobbel. She is back again today with us, and we're going to talk all about lying. Man, just take a deep breath with me, because this can be a topic that drives us to crazy places. So, as you heard me say during our episode, we talked about flight. This was a huge issue for me personally as a child, and something that, as somebody who has ADD and is a flighter, man, it is something that is very hard to get away from impulsively doing as you're coming up. And so, I will say that anytime we have posted on social media anything regarding lying or advice about dealing with dishonesty, it gets an abnormally large response. And so we wanted to have Robyn over today to talk with us about lying, because in our opinion, she just nails it. And as you would imagine, and as you're finding out as a parent, there is no prescriptive 3-step program to get your kids to stop lying, right? The same way that there's no prescriptive 3-step program to get your kids to sleep. It's different for every child, right? So we do want to give some very helpful overviews and big picture structure. And then we do get into some very particular practical applications and advice here. But just remember, as with every situation that you ever have as a parent, each individual situation does require some nuanced understanding of your child, your family member, your partner, spouse, your friend, and how they operate, what their history is, how they're hearing and feeling different things, and messaging and how it comes to them. So just remember that while we're not going to give the 3-step process to end lying in your family forever, what we are going to do is hopefully build in a context and a framework for us to look at this and to hopefully build our compassion and also help to get to the heart of what causes these things in our kids and in our family and friends as well. So without any further ado, here she is, Robyn Gobbel. Well, we're back today with one of our favorite people on earth, Robyn Gobbel, and we wanted to talk about an easy, lighthearted topic that none of us struggle with either ourselves or our kids, which is lying. So we're here, Tana and I are here with Robyn today. And so Robyn, I'll say first, obviously, just thank you for being on with us again, and we're super glad to have you here. Why don't we jump kind of right into this and talk about lying and just get right into the overview of like what is it that we need to start with when we're looking at lying and dishonesty and understanding this with our kids and ourselves.
Well, it's awesome to be here with you both. I've been looking forward to it so much that things are hard. And this like spot on my calendar, which is like, oh, I get to be with JD and Tona today. Yay. So really glad to be here. Yeah, lying. I mean, same, right? Like the families I work with, the humans I know on the planet.
Yep.
Lying is a thing.
Yeah.
And it's why? Well, there's a lot of reasons why it's a thing, but one of the reasons it's a thing is because everybody lies.
Yeah.
It's like the most normal human behavior. And I would say first, to challenge everybody who's listening, just pause and think about, like, when was the last time I lied? Yeah. Even a teeny tiny lie, or lied by omission, or just skated around a little truth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And most of us don't have to think too far back in our history to come up with something. Would you all say that's true about you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really, actually, when I think about like, why is lying so hard for people? I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but actually I think that's probably up at the top, is because we talk about things related to lying so much. We talk about respect. We talk about integrity. We talk about these like characterological values that we all would agree are good.
Yeah.
And lying conflicts with those, and everybody lies. And so making sense of all of that.
It's a quandary. It's a quandary.
Quandary.
Yep.
Yeah. Tana.
Well, I'm just like, God, okay, we can just hit stop recording because I thought, surely, Robyn, I thought we were going to get to talk about how we as parents feel about when our children lie. But we are starting right off with a moment of self-reflection on this. It just feels a little too early for that. No, I'm just teasing.
I know.
Oh, goodness, I appreciate that. I'm thinking about like, what does it do in me immediately to like think about it first from a place of like self-observation. And I really did just like, oh my gosh, I just had a major paradigm shift immediately. So thank you for like taking us straight there as we start this conversation. It's important. Well, it depersonalizes it all of a sudden, right? Like it feels like this, like we can talk about that, but like how lying feels like so personal and so relational breaking, but you just like immediately diffused it from being something that's personal to something that's human.
Yes, it's just human, which I do think there's like a huge sigh of relief that happens when we think of it that way, as well as extra kind of moment of terror. Like for me, both happen.
Well, and I'm even just, again, I shared an episode recently. We were talking about flight as a stress response, and, you know, lying obviously pops up a lot in that conversation. And I was sharing that, you know, I am a recovering childhood liar. Like I just was somebody who would impulsively lie a lot, and I didn't understand it in myself. I didn't understand why I would do that. I was really good at it, and really good at being. When you're really good at it, it's really difficult to then shut that valve off as you're trying to have integrity, be a good person, whatever word you want to label that on. And so one of the things that I love, and you talked about this in a podcast you had recently, right? And one of the sentences that you just said, we only lie because it doesn't feel safe to tell the truth. And I thought, maybe we just put that on repeat for 30 minutes in the podcast and just, we all say that over and over again, because at its core, that's the feeling that I would have inside is that, like, ooh, I can't be honest here. Because this is not a space for honesty in this moment, right? Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes, I mean, I think it's hard to take something as nuanced and complex as lying, because there's lots of things that are underneath lying, lots of reasons why we lie, and then distill it down to something like we only lie because it doesn't feel safe to tell the truth. It feels like how can those two things possibly make sense? Like how can something so big and complex as lying have just one like origin? But if we pause and really got quiet with ourselves and thought about, again, times we've lied, times our kids have lied, times we've watched other people lie, it's like there's really no other reason. Aside from without question, I do think kind of creating this other version of reality that we like to live in can be a bit of a habit.
Yeah.
But even that has its origins in like, we're only not acknowledging what's true and real because something about that doesn't feel, and I use the word safe. I know for some folks that feels like a hard word. I mean, we could say good. We can really deconstruct the word safe, but there really is no other reason. Like, why wouldn't we just say something straight up? And also a lot of us are told in very clear ways that we're supposed to be lying about certain things, right? That like some things don't get talked about when people ask, you know, we can just take the easy cliche, like, how do I look in this dress or whatever, you know, like there's so many ways where we've been culturally conditioned to be polite, to be respectful, to not tell people how we feel because it's not respectful. And then to ask, how are we supposed to know when lying is okay and when it's not okay? It just gets really quite complicated.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. From a stress response place, like when we think about the conditions in the body that can cause that impulsive lying, like that almost automatic response type, like what is actually happening when those responses are coming up?
So when there's, especially if we're going to give like a straight up question, let's put it in my life. Did you take out the trash last night?
There it is.
Right.
There it is.
Straight, just such a simple, straight up question.
Yeah.
That's also really easy to find out the answer to. But regardless, we all know that doesn't actually really matter.
Right.
Did you take out the trash last night? Yes, I did. Okay. And then 10 minutes go by and you look out, you're like, well, no, you didn't, because it's still there and the trash man's already come. And now we have to deal with this full trash can all the way until next week, all those kinds of things. Why wouldn't you just say, oh, shoot, no, I forgot. Right. Well, the first reason that comes to mind for me is when we're stressed, when the brain has a stress response, which we're going to have a stress response because we know that the answer to this question is going to make the other person unhappy.
Yep.
Righteously or not, right? Like I'm happy to acknowledge that, like as a parent, it makes sense for you to be irritated if an important chore didn't get done. Like that's not an unreasonable response in myself, right? Yeah. So my kid knows, like, I'm gonna someone's gonna be unhappy if I tell the truth, and the brain then that stress response of this is a relational rupture.
Yep.
Right. This is someone's disappointed in me. This is like somehow I have to find a way to regulate through those relational pieces, which is actually a pretty tall ask of anybody.
Right.
In a split second, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
In a split second, I got to produce the answer right now.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
And having, no, that's exactly right. Because having somebody be unhappy with you, like triggering somebody else's stress response, which I do if I say, oh, no, I didn't take out the trash.
Yeah.
Now I'm in danger.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Because stressed out humans are dangerous. That is ultimately what it comes down. Like our biology, humans are the most dangerous everything to other humans. There's nothing more dangerous than a human to another human.
Yeah.
And so if I'm about to do something that I know is going to trigger somebody else's stress response, I'm pretty motivated not to do that. Yep. Or at least push it off, right? Because the stressed brain loses time, meaning I'm really only able to care about what happens in the next moment.
Yep.
I can't care about what happens in 5 minutes or tomorrow. And we know this by science and the way like our brain processes time. Yeah. That I'm a lot more concerned with what happens in the next moment, even if in 3 moments it's going to get worse, because that will make that person even more stressed that I lied.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that is amazing. Just even saying that the stress brain isn't having like a thoughtful, contemplative, like, using their executive functioning response in that moment. Because what happens to us as a parent or an adult, if we're just putting this in an adult-child relationship context, a kid lies and you're thinking, well, the ramifications of that are worse than if you had just told the truth. Like that seems so logical to us because we're thinking about cause and effect.
Right.
But that's future thinking. Cause and effect is a future state, right? Yes. And I'm hearing you say that isn't available to them in that moment.
Not in that moment. I mean, so there's that cause and effect piece. Like I have to pause. There's a lot of pausing that would have to happen. Be like, It would take my mom about 10 seconds. Like, why did she even ask me to look out the window and notice I didn't take the trash to the road? Right. So I might as well just fess up. Well, first of all, that actually does take a lot of time in regulation to pause and think all of that through. And in additional, then the next skill I'd have to have in order to risk that is regulating through somebody being unhappy with me, even if it's not dangerous unhappy, right? Yeah. Like even if I know, like, my kid's never been in danger because he forgot to take out the trash. Yeah, we're irritated by it, but it's not dangerous.
Right.
But that it takes a lot to regulate through the relational rupture that happens when somebody is even justifiably frustrated with us. It takes a lot to regulate through the feeling of disappointment. I've disappointed somebody else. Disappointment is a feeling that we don't spend enough time giving a lot of care and attention to.
Yep.
So we don't have a lot of capacity to regulate through. So there's a lot of complex things that go into, did you take out the trash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we, as the grown up in that situation, have at least some understanding of what's happening in that moment, like if we can bring some understanding, what do you, how is a different way maybe to navigate that moment with a kiddo that you are just wanting to check in on a chore? Like, do you have any like ideas for sort of where we could go instead?
Yeah, definitely. And I have lots of ideas, and there are lots of really good ideas that I should use more in my parenting too.
Come on,
so
that's right.
Just to all be very
this
clear.
Is like, if we're doing our very best today, which we know is, a little unlikely, just a little unlikely, but yeah. I love it. Same.
I mean, this one is tricky, but the first thing that I'd say, and I know your listeners have heard this before, is don't ask a question if you know the answer to it.
Yeah.
Right. There's no reason actually for me to ask my kid if he took out the trash. In a way, it's kind of lazy on my behalf because it really is quite simple for me to see if he did or didn't. Now, it's not an unreasonable thing to ask. Like, hey, did you remember to take the trash out last night? Like, that's a reasonable thing to ask somebody you're in a relationship with. But if you know that the next thing that's going to happen is a lot of dysregulation or the opportunity for a lie, then it just is an easy thing to not ask, right? To just actually look and then say, hey, buddy, it's Thursday morning. Trash comes on Thursdays at our house. The trash is into the road again. What's up with that? How did that happen? What do we need to do different?
Yep.
Because it's frustrating when the trash doesn't get taken out, and now we don't have room for this week's trash. How do we work together to figure out a plan to, make sure the trash is taken out? So like when I'm at my very best parenting, that's a great example. Like just don't ask and then work together.
Yeah.
But let's say you do ask. And then there's a lie or there's a big reaction. And I think for me, the most helpful thing is my kid can't pause in those moments. He's already demonstrated he can't.
Yeah.
That means I have to do it. I have to be the more regulated one, take a breath, pause. It's a bummer.
Yep.
I sometimes resent how much I have to be the grown up.
That's the truth today.
I know.
Yeah.
And pause and, and then do what I need to do internally. I mean, what I do next really varies on how did my kid lie? Did he throw himself on the floor? Which he'll do when he's unhappy doing? Like what should just happen as far as like, how do I respond to that? But a moment of pause, which is, whoops, I sort of set him up for that. And somehow there's a dynamic in our relationship that he would rather risk a relational rupture that comes through lying than he would rather risk the relational rupture that comes through, oops, I didn't do what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that's just a place for me to pause and get curious about like, why is that?
Yeah. I have, I don't mind, doing a little bit of self-reflection here on this particular episode. For those listeners that may or may not know, we have a fairly large family and we have older young adult children, and then we have some kids that are younger. And as a parent, I do think that this, like what Robyn, you just so beautifully articulated, in like 3 minutes, just has taken me like, I don't know, a decade to work through, and a long process. That curious piece has been an incredibly long journey for me. And I'm thinking we could maybe all relate to that in different ways as we are processing, how to pause and show up for our kiddos and ourselves well in those moments. But lying in particular has been a personal parenting stress spot for me. And a lot of like thinking back to my own past and history and my own growing up and my family dynamics and like, why is that moment of like risking telling me the truth? Like, why is it so painful to me when it doesn't happen? And, the answers weren't easy to come by. Like a lot of like, I don't know why this bothers me so bad, but it does. And I am not a safe place. I could say it was for multiple kiddos, but one of my children in particular, and we've had a lot of conversations about it now on the other side of like the times that mom did not respond well, like tons of repair have come initiated by me as I've like, oh my goodness, this is so deep in me. And, it would be a situation where my husband would be in the same scenario and maybe a child would lie about something. And I could see him navigate through it with like more calm, more regulation, like more ability to show up and problem solve. And I just got stuck and so reactionary. And like I went into major self-protection mode in that moment. I got so dysregulated. And I just knew I was, because I could look at him and be like, well, he's not, the line's not okay, but he isn't absolutely losing his mind right now.
Yes.
And I am. Like, so what's going on in me? And I wish that I could say that the answer was fast and easy, but it wasn't, Robyn.
Yeah.
It wasn't. And I didn't, I don't mean to overshare, but I didn't come to my like big, huge epiphanies until I started seeing it in a friendship. Like something happened in a friendship that went a little bit sideways, and I felt the same feelings come up, and I was more clear and level-headed to pull that apart because it wasn't a parent-child dynamic.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, why is that impacting me that way? And then I'm like, oh, look at my past. Oh, that's what's happening in my relationship with this kiddo.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Yeah. We can say it, but my goodness, it's so layered, right? Does that resonate with either one of y'all?
For sure. Well, it's so layered. So, and lying, I think lying and food issues and the work that I do with families, so layered. There's a way that, at least in Western culture, we have made connections between things that aren't connected, which is like, if my kid eats the way that I want them to eat, I'm a good parent, essentially, when it comes down to it.
Yes.
I'm good at mothering. I'm good at caregiving. If my child eats in this way that other people determine is good. Right. And then I think that's really true about lying. Like, of all the things we wouldn't want somebody outside our family to know about, or to experience from our child. Right. It's for them to lie. There's something about the way that we've conflated a very normal behavior with integrity, with character, with it meaning this person doesn't respect me. And if I don't, and then we could start talking about all sorts of bigger things regarding like just Western culture and what it means to be respected and why that's important and the fear that comes up when we're not. I also think like for me, when I'm lied to, or when I experienced somebody lying to me, it took me a long time to unpack that as well, because I actually start to feel like my own reality is being called into question. And when my reality is being called into question, I start to feel like my selfness, like my existence is getting called. Like, am I real? Which that sounds bananas, I think, to say out loud. Like when your kid is like, yes, I took out the trash. And it's like, and now I'm worried that I don't exist.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, come on, please. And maybe in that exact situation, it doesn't, but there's absolutely situations that have come up for me. And then being a therapist, I'm just required to be constantly looking at the stuff, because believe it or not, clients sometimes lie to me.
Right.
No. Oh, that's wild. So interesting.
And so, that is where I discovered the hurt part of me was, it's like, what if that person's actually right and I'm wrong? Like, what does that mean? What if they're not lying? Maybe they're telling the truth, even though I know the trash doesn't take you to the road, but and I'm like, if I can't depend on my own experience in reality, and I know this sounds wild to some people, it's like, I just have to question, like, do I exist? Am I here in the world?
Yeah.
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 Okay, well, now it makes a lot more sense why lying creates such a huge reaction.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and the two of you are sharing your internal responses. I think because that was such a thing for me, I immediately feel this grief of like, I've not provided a safe place for my kid. And before they've even gotten to the end of their lie, I've already got them in jail 10 years from now. You know what I mean? I'm like,
yeah.
What this means? It just means they're going to be on the street for the rest of their lives.
Saving their
Holy crap! Yeah. Like, and so and it might be jail. It might be no one's going to like you. It might be you're stuck living with us forever because you're an outcast of society and you have to stay inside because no one can trust you. Like, and all of those fears are things either that were like projected on me early on growing up, or things that I just desperately don't want them to have to feel for themselves as they grow older, right? I don't want them to have to feel like they can't be trusted because I know how that feels, right? I don't want them to feel like nobody will listen to you or believe your stories because I know how that feels. And I conversely, as an adult, know this amazing freedom and joy of being able to be in a relationship where, we've done the work for me to say something really disappointing and to be met with grace or with love in that, or to be met with like, this pisses me off. I still love you, but this is hurtful,
Authentic.
And what that moves me to is deeper levels of honesty, right? So I think what's so funny is we always set out to talk about how do we address these issues, and almost every time, and I would say every time there's some component of it, but almost every time, the first thing is getting our own stuff out of the way. And when our own stuff is out of the way, when I'm in my right parenting mind, I am totally unfazed by lying. It's like I've got the kryptonite in my hand because that was my thing. I'm kind of like, this is all you got? Come on. That wasn't even good. I can pick that apart immediately. And it allows me to then be patient and go, man, I know that fear. Hold on. Hey, let's rewind. I know that's not true. And I'll try to debunk it right out of the gate to say, but before you try to cover it up, I want you to know, this isn't even about that. And I'll try to go straight to the heart of the issue. And we talk about scaffolding all the time. And I think there are 10,000 things that I do not do well or I impulsively react to with my kids. I think because of this having been an issue with me specifically, there has been some ingrained patience that I've got toward it. Mm-hmm. But this scaffolding of let me not even try to get you to the point where you are doing the hard, blunt, my chest is in pain, honesty. But let me show you right away I know what happened or I know it isn't true and just take the pressure off of you. You don't even have to lie because I know that this is not true. So what actually happened? Just know you can tell me this, and I'm not here upset. I want to know because I want to, and then you kind of lay out your parents' job. I want to be able to help you grow into a person that is healthy and whole and doesn't have to feel this pressure to make stuff up to be accepted or whatever. And so, sometimes that ends with doubling or tripling down on a dumb lie. And you're just all right, okay, well, whatever. Yeah. And then sometimes you get these beautiful moments of, all right, I'll tell you, And so, all of us had this self-examination to do to realize why the reaction wells up in us the way that it does before we begin to then diagnose this. But then within our kids, lying is the faceplate that's happening, but there's always a deeper back end thing causing it, right?
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that I think even all three of us are great examples at how something different's happening in each one of us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In that interaction, the way that we are showing up in that moment, it's individual, and it is so deeply tied to just personality and wiring and history, and every one of our when we're curious with ourselves and we come to some deeper self-awareness, probably going to lead us down some different reasons why we feel the way that we do in that moment. So I think our strategies for how we move through that moment are probably pretty unique as well, right? Would you, like, what are your thoughts about that, Robyn? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we all are going to have our own pieces about like what's hard about this, what's tender about this. Yeah. And I also want to make sure it's really clear that simply because something's hard or tender around us, or sometimes we do react in certain ways, like it doesn't necessarily make our kids lying our fault.
Right. Or okay, right? Like,
well, no, that for sure too. Like, that's another, that's almost another Western culture thing too, this like black and white thinking.
Yeah.
It's like, no. To be clear, the behavior still isn't cool.
Sure.
Yep. Right. That's right.
And it doesn't have to blow us up. Right. Yeah. It doesn't, we don't have to like freak out about it. Yep. And there's this thing I'm sure y'all come up against too when working with such mindful, thoughtful, curious parents who would be listening to a podcast like this. Is like it all of a sudden becomes really easy to be like, oh, this is my fault.
Yes, I was going there. I was like, we've got to talk about that because that is where I go. I know better. I should be able to create the perfect scenario where my child feels so safe that they should be able to tell me everything. So if they lie, I didn't create felt safety. Wah. And then I'm in a different place in my head, right?
Right. Yeah, we've created this really mixed up idea of what felt safety is, first of all, which is I'm not in charge of anybody else's experience of safety. I can offer safety. I'm not I cannot be in charge of if that person receives it.
Amen.
That doesn't take me off the hook.
Amen.
For doing intensely hard work to make sure that I'm as safe of a human as possible in these relationships that I'm deeply committed to, right? Like I don't work really hard to be in relationship with the male lady. I don't have to. I never come into contact with her, or very rarely do I come into contact with the male lady. I work really, really hard in my deeply intimate relationships. Yeah. And that's my job. That's my responsibility. That's my commitment to these humans that I've said, I will be in this intimate relationship with you. That doesn't make it my fault.
Totally.
Right. And I thought some of that I think is just human parenting, right? That again, my kid doesn't have a significant trauma history besides being raised by me. And he does occasionally lie. And my husband and I can do the really important work of looking at like, how have we set this up? Like, how have we set up these dynamics in our family where the other day he said that he left his wallet at home so that he didn't have to drive when it's kind of like, well, did he just really not want to? And for some reason it didn't feel okay for him to just say, I really don't want to drive right now. And how did we contribute to that? Like how have we created a scenario in which he would rather say, but also it's not our fault. And also he's human. Like maybe in that moment, he just really felt like not dealing with anything except I left my wallet at home. Right. Okay. We don't have to, like, this isn't pathological.
Yeah.
I know. I feel like I'm hearing this like, I don't know. It's always a little bit of both and, right?
Yeah.
Like evaluate my contribution, own what's mine to own, and release what isn't. Yeah. And man, we can say that in like a quick little cute summary. And that's like, holy smokes. That's like everything. Right.
Well, and what we're talking about too, like it is so complicated. It is both and because sometimes our kids have intense trauma histories that do produce this fear mountain that is like, I can't conquer this. Sometimes our kids or we lie about dumb stuff for no conceivable reason at all, right? The wallet thing is a perfect example. I mean, the other night there was, let me think of a more generic way to say this. There is food evidence in
someone's room,
in someone's areas that I was like, and I trapped with my question. Like, did you have a bar last night? And like, no. And I was like, it's touching you while you tell me that. Like the rapper is on. So I think there's those moments where that was not connected to some like scary, like, I better just say no because I can't face the truth. Like that was just kind of like an impulsive, and that falls more on this ADD side, right? Of like, sometimes there's this impulsive, like, I see it going out and I'm like, oh, no, that's not true. Oh, it's gone. Like I can't, I already said it too fast. I didn't want to face it. I thought maybe they'd turn away and not see this, whatever. And so I think it is, what we say so often on here, we become students of our kids, we get curious, all that. We brace ourselves and we have to understand the residual effects of trauma, stress, adversity do exist and can produce these things. But again, there's not this generic like formula. We can't just whip out our playbook in the moment and go, aha, got it. That's why this is happening now. And so if we can become students, like it does help us to be able to nuance those arguments, because sometimes there is, as a kid, you don't want to face what you know is going to be a hard sit-down conversation from your parents. And so you're like, I'm just going to tell them that it's at school and I don't care, right? Whatever. And so in those situations, I think, and one of the things that you said, Robyn, on your episode, just, shift the focus in those situations into just offering connection, regulation, felt safety, right? Like that's kind of the back end, like beginning to rebuild after this is connection, regulation, felt safety. Yeah. And if we can reinforce those things, hopefully as we go, that floor gets higher and higher of trust that exists, within our relationships.
So I have a super practical question because I'm really curious, Robyn, what your thoughts are about this. So we've talked some in the past and I've heard people say, and I've even thought about doing it, and it kind of works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. But let's say you're in a situation where, maybe a kiddo lies about something and you know that it's not the truth. So however you got there, maybe you trapped them, maybe you could just tell by their reaction they probably weren't telling you the truth or whatever. Maybe it is a kiddo that might tend towards impulsive reactions or responses. What is your thought about like a gentle, like, hey, sweetie, would you like a minute or two to think about if you want to give mom a different answer to that? Or like, what do you think of, like, how do you feel like that is a successful way to navigate that moment? Would you make some other suggestions for how to move relationally towards some truth telling while creating felt safety, or modeling them having a moment to pause and letting them have a minute to decide if they are safe to tell the truth? So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's kind of an annoying thought, it just really depends. Oh, I know that's so annoying. Right? It just depends on so many things. Yeah. I mean, I do absolutely, like, the pause before saying something is a really important skill we want our kids to have, right? Like, I want myself to have more of a pause. It'd probably be good if my husband had more of a pause. Like, these are good life relational skills and very, very valid things to want to teach our kids in the moment of, for some kids that are temperamentally, set one way, saying something like, hey, I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to just have a pause. I'm going to come back. We're going to try this again. That could go all sorts of different ways depending on the kid. Like for some kids, that would just, the shame would crater them.
Totally.
And that could look actually like shame, or it could look like rage, because that's a great way to respond to shame. It could look like digging heels in even more. Like, I don't need any time.
I need the truth.
Right. I am telling you the truth. So I think there's a lot of great ideas out there. And I think for a lot of kids with certain temperaments, with how dysregulated they are in that moment, with what their history has been with that parent, of certain other kinds of repairs that were similar to that could be a great experience. Like, hey, honey, I'm going to go grab a drink and I'm going to come back. And just a couple minutes, we're going to try this all over again. And let's just see what happens then.
Right.
Like, for some kids,
maybe that would work for some. Great. Yeah.
And then for some, it wouldn't at all. And I think catching moments outside of dysregulation or outside somebody being in trouble to really narrate through noticing people in movies who have taken a pause, noticing other people in your life who have taken a pause before they respond, narrating out, like, when we download our days at the dinner table, and, I was having this conversation with my boss and they said this, and I really noticed I had to take a breath and pause and think hard before I answered. And that was hard, like a lot of more inner dialogue. Sharing can be super helpful just to help, just to share, like, these are like normal human experiences. This isn't about you being a bad kid. This is about like life and trying to figure it out. So I think absolutely that could be a great thing for some kids. And then for some, it's not. And how we know? We try.
I know. And you pay attention in the moment.
React.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And I really think with lying, one thought, I've had two thoughts come to me. Let's see if I can actually articulate them. One of them is we do have to get really honest with ourselves about how honest we are in the world. And even I've lived in different cultures where there is a culture of lying. There's a culture of smile, happy face. There's a culture of everything's fine here. There's a culture of we don't talk about hard things. We don't. We just all pretend everything's fine. And I've seen that kind of culture in families and in communities. And I do think there's a place that doesn't make it our fault, but I do think we have to be super honest about, do we have a culture in our family of saying things that are hard? Like, I really don't like what you've cooked for dinner today.
Yeah.
That is hard. I really don't want to eat this. My kid, like, for example, on my best days, my kid's allowed to say, I don't want to do XYZ chore.
Yep.
That doesn't mean he doesn't do it.
Sure.
Right. Just allowed to tell you his feelings about it.
Absolutely. He's even allowed to be like, I don't want to do it now. Can I do it in an hour? And I know that can get really tricky. I'm not necessarily suggesting. I'm saying is we have to get really honest with ourselves is what is do the people in our family feel like we can really say real things? Because sometimes when we're dealing with something tricky with our kid, we have to pause and ask ourselves that question and be like, this isn't our fault, but I can see how we've unintentionally contributed to this.
Yeah. Gosh, that's hard. But
the other thing I've thought about a lot lately, probably because of my own personal life, is that when it comes right down to it, the behaviors in our kids that are making us really stressed or unhappy or triggered or whatever is because the serve and return of relationship that we're longing for is getting messed up. Everything 100%. Is about that. Everything is about
100%. So I could not agree with you more.
Yeah.
Yes.
The serve and return of relationship doesn't involve lying.
Yep.
Right. Yep. Right.
And if I thought of every behavior in another human that, let's just say, pisses me off.
Yeah.
Yep.
It would be that the serve I sent to them wasn't returned in the way that I was hoping for.
Yep. Yes. I mean, that's it. That's it.
We all exhale.
And it's fair to be upset about that.
Right.
Like it's fair to be like, hey, I served you myself. Like I when I say serve, I mean like that energetic, like I volleyed something to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
again, I presented an opportunity for connection.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I presented an opportunity for connection. Yeah.
And instead of volleying it back to me, you chucked it in my face, or you grabbed it and ran away, or you slammed it on the ground, or you kicked it back. You know what I mean? Like there's all these energetic ways that serve and return gets thwarted.
Yeah.
That really is what hurts.
That's really good. And I think, so my personality immediately goes, oh, this is hard. So what's the silver lining here? And I think the silver lining here is that doesn't mean the game's over, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing
good,
for us to remember in that situation. Like I served the ball to you, you hit it over the fence, not in a good way. Like
but we're both still on the court. but we're both still on the
Yes.
court.
We're still there.
Yes.
We'll go find another ball. We'll start over again. Now I think the
Or
thing
we'll go
that,
find that one together. How about
right,
that?
yeah,
We'll go
yeah.
on the hunt for the one that's
great.
lost.
That's great.
Back to
And I think
that.
that
I love
what we probably grieve as parents the most is just that sigh of like, and I have to be the one to lead this,
Yes.
Like, because if we want our kids to lead it one day, like they've got to see what it looks like, and sometimes we just don't have energy for that. But I love this as kind of our like a closing thought to this conversation is that our job is to continue offering ourselves up for connection and then helping our kids. We're giving tennis lessons to carry this analogy out, and teaching them how to return it. And if we can do that graciously, it doesn't mean that the ball isn't going to, hit the net or get slammed down or set on fire or whatever. It just means that we can continue to come back and try again and start again and keep on playing. So.
And the tenderness that's happening in that moment. Like I'm thinking about, Robyn, you used the word tender earlier. Mm-hmm. And I don't use that word very often when I think about these situations, but it resonated really deeply with me because that's what's happening. It's a moment of vulnerable tenderness where we're saying we're available to you and we're in relationship with you and you have some power in this relationship to navigate where we go because I'm being tender with you as I serve up a moment of connection. And so, I think it's, you are always so compassionate to create such safe places for caregivers in the work that you do, Robyn. And I deeply appreciate that because we do have feelings. We are human in the middle of navigating these relationships. And so the tender places in us, it's okay to honor those and like name them and hold space for them and be kind to ourselves.
We have to. I mean, I really think we have to.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, you're so welcome. I do. I love these parents so much. And I watch sometimes, then it's so easy to shame ourselves. Like, oh, I know the right way to do this, or I shouldn't have feelings that the serve wasn't returned because I know why it's hard for my kid to return it. I'm like, well, both can be true.
Yeah.
It can be so hard that, just like you said, it's vulnerable, even with our kids, to offer ourselves up for connection. Yeah. When we don't get it back in the way that we're longing for, it hurts.
Yeah.
And that gets to be true as well as it gets to be true that we can understand why our kid is struggling with this. Like they both are there. So.
Yeah. So true.
I love that.
Gosh, Robyn, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Always.
And I mean, I hope you're unofficially contractually obligated to come on with us a lot of times and just keep doing this off and on. So, we appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Before, is there anything you want to share, like with our listeners as we're closing, that where they can find you, any fun projects you're working on, like any shameless plug for how to find you in the world? Yeah,
you bet. So I also podcast, so they can find that, of course, Parenting After Trauma. I have got so much just free resources on my website. That's just robyngobbel.com. I do have my, virtual community for parents of kids with big behaviors. Most kids have experienced trauma, though not all of them. Yeah. That's called the Club. And, the club is open for new members periodically. We're sort of in the middle of a facelift right now. Like we're kind of I'm saying we're building a new clubhouse. And so
I love that.
As soon as the clubhouse is done, we'll be welcoming new families in again. And it's just like, I think the most brilliant parents in the whole world are there. Brilliant meaning like they're light, like brilliance in a light kind of a way. Like they're just the most amazing humans. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, we'll link all that in the show notes and we will see you next time. Well, as we always say, I'm just so grateful for Robyn and for her work. And so she mentioned it in the interview, but one thing that we would love for you to do and just for you to know about is her website. Her website is expansive and has so many free resources on it, so many different things that you can go and consume. She also has a podcast, the Parenting After Trauma podcast. It's great. You should go listen to it tomorrow. later on today, whatever. So you can find it. You can find her website, robyngobbel.com, on the internet. You can find her on social media. We'll link all of that in the show notes. She also has a thing called The Club, which is a periodically open for enrollment parenting group, basically. Kind of almost think of it as a kind of a parenting therapy, a parenting support group. So you can go and check that out as well. Robyn's one of our favorites, and you can hear why. I will say the thing that has stuck with me out of this conversation is that ending piece we talked about, that lying so often frustrates us because it interrupts that serve and return of relationship, that we offer ourselves for a connection, or we have hope for a connective moment, and only to have it dashed by lying. And that sometimes at the core of it, even if we don't realize it, sometimes that is what is causing so much pain in these situations. And so just remembering that just because the ball hits the net sometime, or the ball goes out of bounds sometimes, does not mean that the game's over. So for us, we can pick back up. We can go find that ball together. Like Tana said, we can keep on playing and serving back and forth, serving and returning in relationship with our people. So a huge thank you to Robyn again for coming out. Go check out our website, follow her on social media. And I will say, just buckle up, because the rest of the spring, we've got another lineup of incredible guests who are coming, along with some new exclusive, I will say, content that we are writing right now, and we are just thrilled to be able to share with you very soon. So for Mo and Tana Ottinger, for Robyn Gobbel, for Kyle Wright, who edits and engineers all of our audio, Tad Jewett, the creator of the music behind the ETC podcast, I'm JD Wilson, and we will see you next week on the Empowered to Connect podcast.